Today I'd like to do a video on civil unrest, preparation, and response. As we get closer to 2020, it's going to be an election year, and those historically lately have gotten a little violent with protests and rioting. And with the events going on in Virginia, I think it's important to take a step back and just go over some good safety measures in case civil unrest does happen. I want to start with saying first, I always hope cooler heads will prevail. The way that these two specific events are going, everyone pretty much has their line in the sand, and no one's willing to budge one way or the other. And usually when you get to the movable object analogy, something's got to give. So hopefully going into that, things will calm down, and hopefully 2020 will be an uneventful and peaceful election year, and Virginia will have the year come, and better decisions will be made, and then stuff will calm down. But if not, here are some things that I think are important. First, you should avoid rioting and protesting areas. If you live in a large city and it's on the news or it's just floating around social media, there's going to be protesting and rioting, just don't go there. That's a good first step. Just don't go there. If it's on your route to work, home, whatever that might be, make sure you have other avenues. I'm going to go over that in a second, but first step is just don't go to the protesting. That's a good option. That way you don't get hurt, you don't get involved in something, you don't get arrested. Your family doesn't have to deal with you being arrested. You don't have to go in the hospital. All those things. You don't have to get angry. It's good all the way around. So then number two, if you are in a major city, you should begin planning for multiple ways to get home from work in the event rioting has blocked streets. Again, historically, with 4 years ago and the time leading up to it, rioters chose to block streets and major highways, and in one case near Memphis, it caused an ambulance not to be able to get to a pediatric patient. So just do your best to be able to plan multiple ways, and don't be locked into one freeway is the only way you get home, or whatever that might be. Third, food in general. This I've covered a bunch. When there was rioting in France lately and in the past year, and if you look at rioting in the States, the last presidential election and going back before that, the good stores will close if they're in those areas, because they don't want their employees to have to try and get through all that madness that's outside. And if that's the case, the stores aren't open, gas stations aren't open, grocery stores aren't open, convenience stores aren't open. To aid in not having to pay insurance on trucks that are burned down and damaged and looted, fill in the blank, whatever you might think could happen to them, they just don't send resupply trucks. What's the point in sending an 18-wheeler in with a bunch of stuff that is just going to get looted or burned down? Why would you do that? So you don't. So you need to make sure when there's rioting that if the store is closest to you, if you live in an area and there's rioting out near your house, not exactly outside but in the neighborhood, then just plan ahead that you need to make sure you have enough groceries at home, to last a while. It doesn't have to be 2 years of supplies, but I think a few weeks is a healthy number. especially if you live in an area where, say you live in DC, or you live in Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, San Francisco, places where rioting, again, historically, has been very intense. If that's where you live, just make sure you have supplies that are built up in that event. Number 4, in the event cell phone networks get saturated, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan in place, and I have 2 subcategories of this. One is you be able to talk to your loved ones no matter what. This means that, say there is, again, mass rioting, influx of people, just crazy outside. You need to make sure that if the cell phone network is not getting calls through, and the messaging services are having issues going through, that you can still communicate with the people you care about. And there's some options. Iridium has satellite phones, has an inReach Mini. GoTenna, they have the text things. I've gone over that before. And again, the GoTenna is short range, but if you're in an area, that's an option. Iridium is global, no real limitations there, just line of sight to the sky, but that's easily remedied with a lot of options. Two-way radios are another option. That can be short range or long range. If you have your amateur radio license, that could be long range, medium range repeaters within the city. GMRS is another option. GMRS is you do need a license, but you don't have to take a test. And most cities, large cities at this point, have at least one, usually much more than one GMRS repeater. You would need a radio that would work with that. Midland, I'm a huge fan of Midland. They sell their micro mobile series that are pre-programmed for GMRS repeaters. You need to have permission to use those repeaters though. So it's just something to keep in mind. And other non-cellular based communication options. If you have something else that you like to use to communicate, that's something good too. But best option is you need to be able to talk to the people you care about quickly and efficiently. If the cell phone and, not that the whole internet has to go down, but Facebook Messenger could go down, WhatsApp could go down, iMessage, unlikely, but could go down, those kind of situations. The second part of that is you also need to be able to, near worst case scenario or worst case scenario, you need to know what everyone's plan is if you cannot talk to everyone. Say your kids are in school and, typical large city families, you have one person that works, over in this city, another person that works in this city, and the kids are in the middle. Who's going to get the kids if there's traffic? What's the plan for that? What's your kind of, moment where you say, okay, I need to leave work and go get the kids? And does your spouse know that's the plan? And then they know to go home, whatever your plan is. But that way, if you do, calms down situation, then you don't have to worry about how are you going to get a hold of someone to figure out what you're going to do. You already know what you're going to do. And then you just go about what your plan is. Or if you don't have kids, how are you two going to get home? If you do have multiple routes to get home, and again, this goes for picking up kids too, does everyone have a general idea for how long it would take for you to get to either the school or your house? If full calms down and rioting in the streets, so that way they don't have to start getting worried if you're not home in 25 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it usually is, and that some good estimation and sitting down and tabletopping some ideas, that it really might take 2.5 hours to get home. And if that's the case, then your spouse or your kids at school, they don't need to worry. They don't have to sit for a long time. They don't have to be concerned when 2 hours rolls around and you say that it usually takes 2.5 hours in that kind of situation. The next thing, number 5, is make a point to learn trusted local news outlets. usually the national media isn't going to start covering something until, it's either really bad, which is usually really big, or some other situation. Typically there's 1 or 2 AM stations in big cities. There's, FM stations that do music, but they also do some news. And then there's also your local TV channels that cover news. And if things start getting hot, getting possibly violent, then hopefully they will cover those things. But they have a fine line also. The media, as respected news sources, don't want to go out and say that it looks like there's going to be rioting, or it looks like the gasoline's running out, or it looks like stores are closing down, because that will cause panic. So they do have a very hard job in trying to ensure they get information out, but they don't cause panic, which then makes the problem worse. So you just need to make sure you start reading those kind of things. Follow on Twitter. There's a lot of good stuff with, when the tornado sirens were hacked in Dallas several years ago, it wasn't on the news for a while. Some news stations didn't even cover it, but it wasn't on the news for a while. The first time it showed up on any kind of media was on Twitter and on Facebook from CBS in Dallas. And they said that they were aware of something. They don't know what's going on, but they were aware and they're looking into it. But that was well into those sirens going off for a very long time. Twitter and Facebook was already in full swing with that whole tornado siren hacking thing. It was already in full swing on Twitter and Facebook, and people knew they could say, we're in this area, they're going off. We're in this area, they're going off. And yes, it wasn't, this is why they're going off, but you at least were able to start getting some information to start making some intelligent decisions on what was going on. And you just need to know ahead of time where do you look at your news and make that your normal routine, so when something does start seeming like it's getting a little intense, you know where to go to start looking for information. And then I guess finally, again, I hope that hope 2020 in this next week, I guess, is going to start calm. I hope it's going to end calm. I hope it's a presidential election race that is easy, that's not stressful, that's there's no protesting or rioting, and I hope that the stuff in Virginia somehow calms down and that it calms down. So if those things don't happen, I hope these 5 points were helpful, and I hope these 5 points will give you somewhere to start to at least get mentally prepared, because remember, you can always play those games in your head of, if this, then what? And this is just another one of those things. Again, not paranoia, but just precautionary and doing your duty as an adult, and if you have kids, as a parent, because you want to make sure that you're mentally ready for something that could occur, and that your family is prepared to a degree where if something were to happen, you already have some kind of plan in place. But again, it's not paranoia, it's just preparedness. There is a fine line sometimes, but as the adults in the family, if you can take those moments and go over this information in your head of, if this highway shuts down that I take all the time to get home, which way am I going to go? And then one day just take that other route. And then while you're driving on that route, and then say you come to a bridge is a really good funnel where rioters and protesters like to shut down traffic, because then it isolates you, and they can do a lot of damage in that area. So while you're driving down that secondary route or your primary, just think, here's a bridge. What do I do if this gets shut down? Where do I go? Should I exit beforehand? Those are just some good games you could play. And say in your normal conversations with your spouse or your kids, just think, if I couldn't have just sent that text message, if I could not have just made that phone call, how would I have gotten that information from them or to them? Again, I hope this was helpful. and good luck to 2020 for everyone, and I hope everyone has a good, safe year. Thank you for watching.